talking about the books that I read from October to December of the year 2019, Anno Domini. Yeah, I kind of laugh whenever people apologize for how late they put stuff up, because I can almost guarantee that I have them beat by a long shot. Yeah, so I learned my lesson after filming that last February wrap up that we're gonna keep it snappy, keep things short and sweet so that I'm not stuck editing over an hour of footage. So I'm gonna go through what I finished in that month. So I read Mama Day by Gloria Naylor. It is a book about an island. It's a fictional island somewhere in southern United States. The idea was that I believe it was owned by an old slave owner, like a plantation owner, and one of the people he'd enslaved, Sapphira Wade, somehow convinced him to set her free and leave her the island. And so she set up shop on this island, and I think a lot of her descendants still live there. And the story is about root work, African American folk magic. It follows one of her descendants. There's a descendant who still very much practices, and then her granddaughter that she has a very close relationship with, who visits her every once in a while, and the granddaughter's fiance. I really enjoyed this book. I really liked the atmosphere. It sort of took a little bit to get into because we don't really get a whole lot of the magic up front. And in the beginning, it's sort of is it magic? Is it not magic? We don't really know. And it's sort of more a character study of the very young descendant of Sapphira Wade and this man that she's interested in. And it starts off very slow, and I did end up liking it a lot when I finally got through it. I enjoyed the writing. I really like the descriptions of sort of the quirkiness of small town life and little traditions that kind of pop up and people don't really know why, or people have different explanations as for why. I liked this word of mouth, we're not entirely sure what's going on, I have to piece together kind of aspects of life on the island. I liked how thorough and full the characters felt. I didn't particularly, honestly, love any of the characters. The one I liked most was the grandmother, who's still a practitioner of magic. I didn't particularly care for the granddaughter or fiance all that much. The granddaughter just kind of got on my nerves sometimes, and so did the fiance, so I wasn't super into them. And it's not like the grandma didn't occasionally, but also she was just, I thought, so much more interesting, and I just enjoyed her spirit so much more. So I liked her better. Should note that there's some homophobia in the book that doesn't really go addressed. It's a few scenes. It's not a big to-do. It's just a thing to keep note of. It's not, it's sort of presented and not really pushed back on in any way. This is an older novel, so just a thing to keep in mind about. So I read that. I read Crown of Thunder by Tochi Onyebuchi, which is the sequel to Beast Made of Night. It is set in this fictional world loosely based off Nigeria, where there are people who exercise sin and then these sin eaters who consume the sin, and doing so causes different tattoos to appear on their body, symbolizing the sin that they have consumed, and they take on the guilt and whatnot associated with the sin. And Crown of Thunder follows the main character from the first book. In his world, sin eaters aren't treated very well. He's going to this different land where sin eating is handled very differently. It has the sin eaters themselves have a very different role in the social scene. Some are respected, some are sort of seen as wayward, but it's a lot more varied and different than what he's used to, and sort of him healing through that. And also they have to deal with the despotic government from back home that he's fleeing from. And I thought this one was okay. I wasn't into the first book, but I didn't really think I ever questioned that I was going to finish this one. I was this feels kind of paint by numbers-y, how the character is being developed and sort of the things that are happening. But by and large, I just I'm enjoying this character healing. There was a sapphic relationship that I thought was interesting. I would have liked that to get more time, but it was between two side characters. One of the characters discovers sort of a math-based magic and comes into their own power through that, which I thought was very interesting. And I didn't quite care for the ending. There was some twists towards the end that felt very predictable, and I felt like the ending was sort of trying to force tragedy. Like, it ends on this sad note, and I was like, the main character has a certain reaction, which I thought was very understandable and I thought was very in character, but then sort of how the other characters react to that and handle that to like resolve the main conflict, I was like, this seems like odd. Like, was this even necessary? So I thought that was okay. And then I read 2 books in the Justice Center Brothers trilogy. I was so excited when I found them. It's this old sci-fi trilogy written by Virginia Hamilton, who is a acclaimed children's writer, and her specialty was doing African American folklore and writing stories that featured Black characters. And I think she was mostly writing during the 80s, and I did not know that she wrote science fiction. So I found the last 2 books in the trilogy at a thrift store, and I was like very excited because I had never heard of them before. I was like, I didn't even know she did science fiction. Like, how's this gonna go? And it was okay. So Justice and Her Brothers, it's sort of gave me Octavia Butler vibes in the premise. The idea is that 3 African American youths develop these psychic abilities, and they sort of have like different aspects. So one's, I think, for the seeker, one's the shield, and one's the healer, and together they form this thing called a unit, and they can time travel. And they're supposed to be sort of like the future of humanity, so there's like existential angst, because like the way they get their psychic powers is almost through possession. So there's like, you know, it's existential dilemma about like, oh, I am becoming less human. Oh, humanity as we know it is no longer going to exist. What does that mean? Stuff like that. In the second book, Dustland, they travel to a future and they wind up in this weird barren wasteland that they call Dustland. Like, they don't really see much of anything there. Like, it is just like a desert. You can't sense like life much anywhere except for these weird things that aren't quite alive called worlmas. They're like these weird prune-looking things that walk around and break up into dust. And there are slakers, who are these 3-footed pterodactyl-looking things. And then there are, I forget what they're called, but they're basically, they look like human children, but they're all clones of each other. And then there is Myosis, who's this one random raggedy dog who's just wandering around this wasteland and is really creepy. So in Dustland, they time travel to the future. They're like, how do we get into like this future if we're still allegedly on Earth? Like, what's going on? And then in the last book, whose name I'm forgetting, they find out why Dustland existed and like where the rest of the people are. And it is about them dealing with that and sort of like this mysterious, malevolent force that they keep feeling in Dustland and then back home. I didn't read the first one, so I don't know what the setup was like, but my opinion of it was that it was like middling to not good. I had a hard time like connecting with the characters. I kind of couldn't remember some of the characters' names after a while. Like, it's really only the 3 kids, and like I remembered the main sister, Justice. I remembered her brother, who's like very antagonistic towards her, and then there's like another brother that she like, wait, no, I can't remember if he was another brother or a love interest, but he was one that she got along with fine. And like I could not remember his name. Like, I kept forgetting about him, that he existed. The writing was kind of wonky in some parts, and I felt like when I got to the end of the series, I was like, what was the sum total? Like, in Dustland, I was just kind of like getting settled, like just sort of like learning like the novelty of this world and like seeing this world was interesting. And then when I got to like the last one in the series, I was like, this explanation of Dustland doesn't particularly intrigue or interest me. Like, this wasn't like a big whoa, like there's like a big reveal, and it wasn't like a big impactful thing for me. I was just like, okay, like this just feels like more exposition. This doesn't feel like a reveal, like a high stakes moment. And like the last book just feels like very sci-fi tropey. Like, I felt like I just got like a bunch of science fiction like plot devices and like character types thrown in a blender, and like that's how I got the last book. And so it was just kind of like not an emotionally like resonant experience reading these books. And Maisis was kind of the only thing that kept me reading throughout the last book, because she kind of shows up every now and again. Maisis is so friggin' weird. Like, Maisis is this dog that they find, and for some reason they like keep trying to interact with this dog, and they're mind readers, so they know what she's thinking, they can communicate like that. But Maisis is like so creepy. Like, she has the instincts to hunt, so like sometimes she's thinking about like, oh, can I like hunt and eat these people? And then she wants to speak, and she starts imitating their speech, and it is like really creepy. And also she keeps referring to them as master even though they ask her not to, and that's also really creepy. And she's like, oh, I want to be like master, you know, I want to be like these humans. And it's just like, that's disturbing. She was kind of like the main thing I like was really interested in, because I was like, I just didn't know if she was ever gonna like switch and become a threat, or if she was just gonna be like kind of like a weird sidekick. And so that's mostly why I kept reading. So I don't know if it's still in print. Wouldn't necessarily like encourage you to go hunt it down if it's not readily accessible, but yeah, middling to not great. So I've considered going to find the first book to see what I think of it. My library has it. I'm like not in a super big rush though, because I'd have to request it. And like I said, like I think the reason I was like not connecting isn't gonna be like solved by finding the first book and figuring out what's going on. I just think I didn't care for the series that much. Next up is The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. This book centers on a young girl, Corinne, who lives on an unnamed Caribbean island with this forest where these sort of malignant creatures called Jumbies live. And Corinne's mom is dead, and she lives with her dad, who's a fisherman, and they're like right next to the forest. They have this orange grove, and Corinne sells the oranges from this grove to the market. And one day she has to go into the forest because, like, as a prank, some village boys like threw a keepsake of her mother's in there, and so she has to go in there to get it. And that sparks the Jumbies' attention, and sort of plot happens from there. It was loosely inspired by a Caribbean folktale. I think it's called The Magical Orange Tree. And I really loved this book. I really loved the atmosphere about this bustling, vibrant town, and then contrast with like this spooky, mysterious wilderness. I really liked all the Jumbies. Like, I thought we got to see a wide variety of creatures in there, and it was really interesting. I sort of knew of some of them, but still it was like just nice to have like all these creatures, and they're all like, creepy in their own way. Who do you see the Doings, who are like genuinely like creeped me out. There's Lavahoos. There were Succulents, and I feel like there's a couple other ones that I'm forgetting. And some of the descriptions of the main villain Jumbie like actually made me shudder. Like, they're actually kind of gross. I had a reaction thread on Twitter that I will link below for people who want to see it, but yeah, this was a fun read. I would recommend this book, like, highly. And then I read the sequel, Rise of the Jumbies, which I kind of can't tell you too much about, because, you know, it's a sequel, and here or there be spoilers. Basically, in this book, kids are disappearing by bodies of water, and townspeople think that Corinne's to blame, and so she has to go find these kids. And also, like, it's her friends that are going missing, so she also wants to find the kids because of that. And in her quest for these kids, she runs into Mama Delou, who's the water Jumbie who controls the currents, and just asks her for help, and then goes on this quest to find where the missing kids are going. And I enjoyed this book, but not quite as much as the first one. I felt like in the first one, I was really like immersed in the world of the island. What's life like for the people? What's the scenery look like? What's the plant life? What are the animals around here? And in this book, we sort of have the settings split between the island, the ocean, and then they spend some time in Ghana. And I felt like I didn't really get a feel for Ghana, like, as good as I got for the town. I also felt like we got the like, creatures, like, that idea of, like, oh, there's something new around every corner, like, adventurous or, like, exploratory feel, like you're just kind of lessened, which I thought was odd, because I felt like we got most of that feel, like, in the ocean, but in the ocean it's kind of like one or two big things. And I thought like that was kind of odd, because like the ocean is so vast and so strange. And I thought we got like a little less of the atmosphere of the previous book. I felt like the previous book was kind of more foreboding, more creepy, and I felt like this one felt more like kind of a straightforward fantasy quest type book, which is fine. It was just kind of a pivot from the previous one. I thought the mermaids had an interesting backstory. I enjoyed Mama Delo as a villain. She is kind of mercurial, temperamental. I feel like that's kind of a recurring thing in the first book, the idea that things that are kind of antagonists in a moment might not always be antagonists. Like they can be bargained with, reasoned with, negotiated with, and they could become allies, but also you can't always trust them. That's something I liked. And I felt like in the first book, especially, there were sort of themes of just because something is antagonistic or makes your life difficult, you kind of can't just get rid of it. Sometimes it is a necessary thing and you just need to learn to work around it. It's just like a lesson I enjoy because it rings true and it just is something I see in some of my favorite fiction, especially in regards to nature and natural obstacles. So I enjoyed Rise of the Jumbies. I plan on checking out Revenge of the Jumbies, and I guess we'll see like if I guess where we go from here. I'm excited. Then I read Pet by Kweki Mezi. Pet is about this trans teenage girl, Jam, who lives in this post-revolution world. There are these people called angels who rousted out these monsters who sort of were causing all the problems in the old world. She's still on Earth. This all takes place on Earth. But one day, Jam accidentally summons a being who goes by Pet and tells her that monsters aren't all gone and that there's actually a monster living in her best friend's house and is like enlisting her help to get rid of it. And I touched on this book a bit in my Kwanzaa Reflectathon. I'll link that down below. But I adored this book. This was one of my highlights of 2019. I'm going to give it a full-length review. So all I'll say for now is that I really enjoyed Mezi's writing. I really enjoyed their descriptions and their prose. This book has a lot of commentary on religion. I thought it was like there, and I'll get into that more in my review, but I thought there was like commentary on justice. There's a lot of commentary on justice and making gods out of people, putting people on pedestals. A lot of commentary on that. So then I read Slay by Brittany Morris. This is a young adult novel about Kira Johnson, who is one of like, I think she's one of 3 Black students at this predominantly white high school in Chicago, and she's kind of over it. She created this game, Slay, as like an escape from school. It's a place where she doesn't feel like she's the only Black person. She has to like explain everything to everyone or be an example. She feels like it's a place to just express and be free. And that all changed when one day a Slay player is killed over a dispute in in-game currency. And also the game is being stalked by the skinhead who's threatening to shut it down. And Kira has to figure out how to keep her players safe and what she wants to do with the game going forward. So I had a little trouble getting into it. I'm like, okay, so we've got this young adult novel. I feel like this is aimed at like young adult Black American, mostly girls, Black American teens. And it felt like things were being explained that didn't need to be explained, and that kind of threw me because the way I'd heard this book pitched was like sort of like a love letter to Black girl nerds, and I was like, if that's your target audience, like that's who you think is reading the book, why are you explaining some of these things? Like I don't really get it. And then sort of as we go throughout the book, there are references to like older events in Black history, like maybe like the 20s and 30s, references to Black cultural things outside of the United States. And I was like, okay, this makes more sense to me now. The lingo or the culture is not supposed to be like an alienating thing. It's supposed to be like, I'm going to explain everything because I do not know where in the diaspora you're coming from, like what age group and what have you. Like, this could be a thing for like older people who are reading this now because this isn't something they had when they were a kid. Like I was like, oh, okay, now this makes a lot more sense. Seeing like how happy it made like the other Black players who were playing this game is really what sold this book for me. Like that was when I got really excited and hyped about this book. I like that Kira isn't presented as like the moral center of the story. I felt like she was very much shown to be someone who is still learning and invites us all to learn as well. There's a really, I don't think other people were really moved by a scene with Kira's sister. There's a scene where Kira's little sister sticks up for her that made me teary. I thought it was very, very sweet. Um, if you know the scene that I'm referring to, then you might know why, like, not a whole lot of people mention it. Or I haven't seen a lot of people mentioning it. There was an abusive relationship that kind of felt jarring because it came out of nowhere. Like, when I first read it, I was, like, really, like, sucked into, like, the drama that it caused, and I didn't really, like, question it a whole lot. But, like, once I was done the book, I was like, wait, what? I felt like we didn't get any foreshadowing of this, like, whatsoever. Like, there were signs that the relationship in question was not great, but there really weren't any signs that it was, like, as bad as it was. It felt like it escalated really, really quickly. And I was like, that doesn't seem to make sense because they've been together so long that there wouldn't be, like, little hints that, like, you know, we're in a calm spot right now, but it's, like, not always this good. So that was, like, kind of like, but on the whole, I enjoyed this book. I would recommend it. If you're interested in sort of more the practicalities of making a video game and running a video game, I would recommend that you watch Lucy Reed's review of this book because she has some tech experience and she pointed out some things that, like, I didn't know because I don't work in tech and I just thought it was very interesting. So next up is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mbalia. This is a book about Tristan, who is a boxer. He's like middle school age, I think, maybe junior high. He like comes from a long line of boxers, and his friend has recently died, and he's struggling to come to terms with it and sort of like how he's gonna live his life from now on. That like his best friend is gone, he's never gonna see him again. The only memento he has from this friend is a journal, and it is stolen by a supernatural creature. And on the way to retrieve it, Tristan accidentally punches a hole in the sky, and the plot happens. And this is another one I plan on doing a full-length review on, so I'm going to keep things brief. I also mentioned it in my Kwanzaa Reflectathon video. On the whole, I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. I really liked Tristan as a protagonist. The ending was wild. There's a big twist, and I was like, oh man. Also, if you're not following Kwame Mbalia on Twitter, I would recommend it. It's like pretty entertaining. He has a lot of dad jokes on there. I had a reaction thread for Tristan Strong, which I will post in the comment section below. I had like one good pun in there, like one good dad joke that like I kind of wished Kwame Mbalia would see because I thought he would appreciate it, but also like I don't want him. I don't want to tag him and stuff. But yeah, if you haven't read it, I think you would enjoy it. It moves pretty quick and it's a fun read. Next up is A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy. This is set in a North African inspired fantasy world where female heirs to the crown like have to duke it out for who's gonna win. It's like a death match. And the two heirs to the crown at this time are Ava and Issa. And there's like a system of magic in place and stuff, and like Issa has her magic together and Ava does not. So Ava has to get that together if she wants to last. And this is a world with like a couple different groups of people. Like there's with the Khmer, who are part human, part animal. There's the humans, obviously there's the Fae, and then there's the Bloodkin, who are sort of like vampires, basically. The Fae are pretty self-explanatory. Like, if you've seen the Fae in other places, I don't think the lore about them changes that much in this book. I really wanted to make Frozen jokes about Ava and Issa, but it was hard because none of the characteristics of Anna and Elsa, like, evenly lined up with Ava and Issa. Like, I really wanted to do, like, do you want to make a snowman jokes? Or, like, let it go jokes? But it's just difficult. Someone makes some Frozen jokes or Frozen memes about it. They'll be funny. I sort of like knew going into this that like there wasn't going to be a whole lot in there for me. I was like reading reviews and I was like, hoping that like that wouldn't be the case. But I'm realizing that YA fantasy isn't something I need to be reading all the time. Like it's going to be trendy. There's going to be a lot of people putting out stuff in YA fantasy, but I don't need to read everything that's trendy. Because I don't always like it. And like if I know that I'm not going to like it going in, then it was kind of like a waste of time. And really the only reason that I like pushed myself to read this book was because the dust jacket said that it was North African inspired world. And I was like, I haven't read a whole lot inspired by North Africa. Like this will be interesting. And I didn't see anything in here that made me think about North Africa. Like when I think of North Africa, I think of Egypt, I think of like the Mediterranean and like trade around there. I think of the Ottoman Empire and Islam. I think also like the Moors and the Berbers. And I didn't see like any of that in there. I feel like I saw like one item of clothing and like one drink where I was like, maybe that is inspired by something in North Africa, but like, yeah, I just didn't really see any of that there. And so it was kind of like the only thing I came for wasn't present. So it was like, yeah. Like I really like the Bloodkin and the Patch. Like the Patch is basically like the sort of seedy like nightclub after dark area where they like just kind of hang out and dance. And I was like, oh, like vampire nightclub. This is cool. But it's only around for like 5, 10, 15 pages in the beginning of the book. So like, yeah. The book overall was like okay. Like the writing isn't bad. The story's fine. I was just like, this isn't what I wanted it to be doing with my time. Next is The Deep by River Solomon. There are these merfolk whose names I'm forgetting, who are basically born from pregnant slaves who were thrown overboard during the transatlantic slave trade. These mermaids don't have very long-term memories. They instead designate one of them to store the memories for everyone. And in that case, the person who has all the memories is Yetu, the protagonist of the story. I really like River Solomon's writing. I've read some short stories from them. I really loved An Unkindness of Ghosts. I've been waiting for this book forever. I'd really had expectations for it, and like, it was a good read. There was like a cute sapphic romance. I felt like I had a lot of difficulty like connecting with the main character until they sort of started falling in love, which I thought was odd because like I really empathized with Yetu. I felt like Yetu as a character was like very believable. But for some reason I kind of felt emotionally distant from her until she started to fall in love. I don't know what it is. It fell short of my expectations, but like I said, they were set like so high. I was kind of confused because I had read it being billed as like science fiction, and like I'm like, but mermaids are fantasy. And like after having read it, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's some nice science fiction-y touches in here. I felt like there was attention to the scientific detail of what their bodies would look like given that they're at the bottom of the sea. There's no light, there's all this water pressure. How would they communicate? What is the science behind memory, how memories work and how they're stored, and how would you transmit that between two people? I think River Solomon deals a lot with neurodivergence and queerness in their work, and I didn't think this book was an exception. Yetu deals a lot with depression and suicidal ideation. Like, Mermaid Society is basically pretty queer by our standards, but there is a sapphic romance that I mentioned, and there are characters on land who use gender-neutral pronouns. So yeah, so like I enjoyed it on the whole. It was a good read. Would recommend. This book is very good for book clubs. I like really didn't even read it in the mindset of like how to mod it for book club, but I was like, when I finished, I was like, I could have easily come up with like three discussion questions just off the bat. So if you're on a book club and you're looking for a productive book club discussion, I think this is a good pick. And then last up is Everfair by Nisi Shaw. I mentioned this in my first Quantum Reflectathon video, so I'll link that down below as well. This is like a steampunk alternative history set in the Belgian Congo. The idea is that King Leopold II had this atrocious hold over the Belgian Congo where he forced native inhabitants to harvest rubber and maimed and tortured people who didn't meet the quotas that he set. And this is a book set on imagining how could this have been averted, how could this have been mitigated, what would that look like. So there's sort of like a couple of main groups of people. There are the Fabian socialists from England, there are the native inhabitants of the Belgian Congo, there are African American Christians. They sort of have an uneasy alliance with the white Fabian socialists, and they're coming to the Congo to convert people and also to help in this cause. And then there are Chinese railroad workers who I believe were coerced by King Leopold II to make infrastructure for the Belgian Congo, some of whom defect to Everfair. That said, it was like an ensemble cast. There's like a lot of characters. I want to say it's upward of like 5 characters whose point of views that we go through. And it is a slow read. I enjoyed the supernatural elements a lot, but we don't get those till sort of like the second half of the book. One of my favorite characters was Thomas, who starts out as a preacher, but then over the course of the novel is chosen by an Orisha, and he is like managing this change in faith and how to interpret the messages from the Orisha, and I thought that was really cool. There's a character who starts a spy school that I thought was fascinating. There's like this espionage going on that was super cool. But like I felt like a lot of the novel wasn't following the things that seemed the most interesting. And also I just wanted to hear more from the indigenous African characters. Like the story was kind of centrally about them, and I felt like we mostly heard from like their monarchs, but like I wanted to hear more from like people like on the ground. And just because it concerned them more, like what did they think of everything? Just because it was like an ensemble cast, I felt like the plot got stretched around so many characters, between so many narrators, and I just got stuck with narrators I didn't care about. This is a novel that doesn't make excuses or pretenses about what the characters believe. Like this is set in what, 1800s? Like there are characters who are racist, there are characters who are sexist, there are characters who are queerphobic, there are Christian characters who think that their way is the only way, and people who don't adhere to Christianity are heathens, and etc., etc., etc. And the novel doesn't make excuses for those characters or like tone down the reality of like people at the time, what the politics were like at the time, and like what aid often looks like. Given that they want to do this good thing of helping native inhabitants of the Congo, what does that actually look like when like these are all ideologies and the politics of the time? And so to me, it was sort of like a novel about utopia and what it actually takes to build one. But like just because they take up so much of the novel and it takes so long for some of them to grow, I was just kind of like checked out. Like, but it was just like I felt like there were characters who did hold beliefs like that, or who like professed to not believe sort things like that, but like weren't really like realizing how they were still perpetuating the things they say that they didn't believe in. Who I like was like, even if they didn't try to do better, I feel like their characters are more interesting. I want to spend more time with them. I felt like we just didn't. So this was like a slog for me to read. So yeah, I feel like if you like enjoy books that are like a slow read, you like more historical reads, and like that's those things like aren't a turn off for you. So yeah, I feel like it's like if you are okay with all those factors, this is a read for you, but this isn't one that I would just, like hand to everyone, or it's not someone one I'm shouting from the rooftops like everyone should read this. It's like a if you don't mind these things, like I think you'll enjoy this read. So that's what I want. That's what I read in October to December of last year. Thanks for sticking it out. If you liked the video, please give me a like. Hit the like button. If you're reading these books and you want to comment, or something you want to share, comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you, and goodbye.